Hello, my name is Abigail, and I want to tell you a beautiful fairy tale that changed my perspective, and I would love to share it with you. Just before we start, let's take a long breath together and let the air out slowly. Feel the moment and be present in it. Enjoy. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there lived a kind and generous man named Bardon, who was known throughout the land as a great and famous host. Bardon was always kind and caring, with a gentle smile and a warm heart. Even though he did not have much money, Bardon always made sure to provide for those in need, whether they were poor or rich, young or old. The act of welcoming guests was very important to Bardon, and he would often share his food with others, even if it meant reducing the amount of food available for his own family. Everyone knew that with Bardon, they would always be given a hot meal, a comfortable bed, and a supportive shoulder to lean on. One day, a wise and special person named John came to visit Bardon. All the people of the kingdom knew John. He was known as a wise and holy man. When John saw how devoted Bardon was to welcoming guests, he felt great satisfaction. However, Bardon was filled with sorrow, for he knew that his livelihood was poor and he struggled to make ends meet. Before John left, he gave Bardon a blessing. He said that from now on and forever, the universe will bestow great success in Bardon's livelihood, and that by virtue of this success, Bardon will be able to engage in relaxation and rest in the sacred work of welcoming guests. Bardon felt a sense of peace wash over him as John spoke these words. He knew that the wise man's blessing would be a great comfort to him. Once the blessing of the wise man took root, Bardon's business began to flourish. His humble trading house became a bustling hub of activity as people from all over the world came to buy his goods. His competitors became envious of his success, but Bardon was too busy to even notice. Every morning, he would rise early, pray quickly, and rush to his trading house to serve the customers waiting at the door. He was so busy that he didn't even realize when the sun had set, and it was time to close up shop and go home. As Bardon became more absorbed in his business, he began to neglect the guests he once loved to welcome into his home. He entrusted the care of his guests to his servants, not realizing what was really happening in his own house. The people of the town noticed the change that had come over him, and they were saddened by what had happened to the kind and warm-hearted Bardon they had once known. They whispered among themselves, wondering what had caused Bardon to become so focused on his business that he forgot the importance of welcoming guests. And though his wealth continued to grow, Bardon knew that something was missing from his life. One day, the wise man sent a messenger to Bardon to ask him for a little money to help the needy. However, the messenger was not able to reach Bardon because he was always busy with his many works from morning till night. After an arduous journey, the messenger returned empty-handed to the wise man, explaining that Bardon was so busy that there was no way to reach him. The wise man knew he had to visit Bardon in person to understand what had happened. How Bardon, with the big heart whose home was always wide open, is no longer present in his home. The sage went on a journey and arrived at Bardon's house, but he was stopped by devoted servants who condescended to prevent him from seeing Bardon. At last, when the sun rose, he wished to deliver a message to Bardon, saying that his wise teacher, John, was waiting for him in a nearby cart. When Bardon received the message, he immediately left his business and ran joyfully to greet his wise teacher. "How are you?" he asked with reverence, and invited the wise man to stay in his house. The wise man agreed, and they entered Bardon's house together. During the visit, the sage noticed that Bardon's house had changed since his last visit. It was now a magnificent and eye-catching house with unique furniture and colorful utensils resting in various corners. The floor was covered with tastefully made carpets. However, there were no longer the same hard-working people he had met on his previous visit. The wise man and Bardon stood in front of the window and looked at the people walking in the street. The wise man asked Bardon, "Do you know who these people are?" Bardon looked at the milkman hurrying from door to door and at the woman dragging a ragged shopping cart behind her and shook his head. "Of course, I know them," he replied. "This is the milkman Don who runs on the doors from morning to night and barely gets his bread out." The wise man then pointed to the woman and asked, "And who is she?" Bardon recognized her immediately and said, "This is Mrs. Philos. She has 7 children and is struggling to provide for them. Her husband went abroad to bring income, but he did not return. She often has to bargain for lower prices outside the market to feed her children." The wise man then pointed to a short man standing nearby and asked, "And this man? Do you know him?" Bardon did not understand where the wise man was heading with the questions, but he knew that at the end of the day it became clear to him. So he continued and answered, "This is Pavel the tailor. He is a hard-working man, but life was hard for him. He is poor and a rebel." Confused by all the questions, Bardon walked around the room and stood in front of the mirror to fix his beard. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him. "And who is this person?" asked the sage. Bardon turned and chuckled. "It's me, Bardon. Don't you recognize me?" The man smiled and said, "Of course I do. But tell me, what is this mirror made of?" Bardon thought for a moment before replying, "It's made of glass, isn't it?" The sage nodded in agreement. "And what is the window made of?" asked the wise man, pointing to the window on the other side of the room. Bardon looked at the window and answered, "It's also made of glass." Now the wise man looked directly at Bardon and asked, "How is it that through the window glass we see the milkman, Mrs. Philos, and the people outside, and through this mirror glass we see only you? They are both glass." Bardon looked at the sage with a confused look. The man smiled and said, "Because of the silver lining, you see yourself alone, not like the glass pane of the window with nothing behind it, so you can see beyond yourself. Do you understand, Bardon? Only because of the silver lining can you see yourself alone, and you can easily scrape off that coating, revealing a whole world beyond." Bardon's face looked confused, and after a few moments he realized his mistake. His face was red with shame and regret. "I'm sorry, wise man," he said. "I strayed from the path of kindness and forgot the hospitality I love so much. Money blinded my eyes and made my heart dirty. Without realizing it, I closed my door to the poor, the unfortunate, and the transients who needed me. Bardon, determined to change, went to the mirror and peeled off some of the silver coating. He promised the sage that from now on, he would always remember that money can make him see only himself, but if he looks beyond, he will see a world full of people who need his grace and hospitality. The wise man smiled at Bardon and said, "You have learned an important lesson, my young friend. It is never too late to change and make a difference in the world." Bardon felt grateful for the sage's guidance and vowed to live his life with kindness and compassion towards others. He knew he had a lot to learn, but with the sage's help, he would become a better person and make the world a better place. Thanks for listening. Have a good night and sweet dreams.